My adopted son blocked me from attending his college send-off. I'm Nannie, 58 years old. As a single adoptive mom, my heart swelled with pride watching Jackson grow from a 6-month-old baby into a bright, ambitious teenager. Then his senior year, everything changed. He found his birth parents and slowly pulled away. But nothing prepared me for the text saying I wasn't welcome at his college send-off dinner. Standing in my kitchen, staring at my phone, I felt invisible in my own son's life. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please hit that like and subscribe button while I share how sometimes our children need to lose us before they truly find us. Life before Jackson was lonely. As a nurse in Seattle, I spent my days caring for others' families while coming home to an empty apartment. After my 40th birthday, I made a decision that would forever change my life. The longing for a child had always been there. But after years of unsuccessful fertility treatments, my doctor delivered the news I'd feared I couldn't have biological children. There are other ways to become a mother, she told me gently, sliding a pamphlet across her desk for a local adoption agency. 6 months later, I walked into the Brightside Adoption Center, my hands trembling as the social worker led me into a room where a tiny baby boy waited in a portable crib. 6 months old with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond his age. "This is Jackson," the social worker said. His birth mother was very young, just 17. She wanted him to have opportunities she couldn't provide. The moment they placed him in my arms, something clicked into place. This tiny human who shared none of my DNA somehow felt like he had always been mine. That night in our apartment, I rocked him to sleep, singing songs my mother had sung to me, whispering promises about the life we would build together. Those early years weren't easy. Jackson was colicky, waking every 2 hours through the night for months. I'd rock him until my arms ached, sometimes crying right alongside him from exhaustion. But then came his first smile, directed at me one morning as I leaned over his crib. His first steps at 10 months, wobbling across our living room floor, while I knelt 3 feet away, arms outstretched. His first word, "Mama," which reduced me to happy tears. The financial strain was constant. As a single mother with a moderate nursing salary, I picked up extra weekend shifts and night rotations. My coworker Thelma often babysat, becoming Jackson's honorary grandmother. I clipped coupons, shopped sales, and learned to stretch every dollar. When Jackson needed special orthotic shoes for his slightly turned ankles at age 3, I took out a small loan rather than compromise on his care. Career opportunities came and went. A management position at the hospital declined because it required frequent travel. A lucrative job offer from a private clinic in San Francisco turned down because Jackson had just started kindergarten and I couldn't bear to uproot him. Instead, I moved us to a smaller apartment in a better school district, sacrificing space for educational opportunity. Birthday celebrations were simple but meaningful. For his 5th birthday, I couldn't afford the elaborate dinosaur-themed party his friends had, but I stayed up all night baking a volcano cake that erupted with real lava when we poured in baking soda and vinegar. The look of wonder on Jackson's face was worth every minute of lost sleep. School drop-offs, soccer practices, science fairs, I never missed a single one. Other parents had partners to tag team with, but I was Jackson's constant, his cheerleader, his safe harbor. The other moms in the PTA sometimes looked at me with pity, but I never felt sorry for myself. How could I, when each night I got to tuck the world's most amazing little boy into bed? As Jackson entered elementary school, I connected with other adoptive single mothers in our area. We formed a support group that met monthly in my small living room. We shared resources, swapped childcare, and provided shoulders to cry on during the challenging times. These women became my village, understanding the unique joys and struggles of our journey. "You're the strongest person I know," my friend Diane said one evening after everyone else had left. "The way you've built this beautiful life for Jackson all on your own." But I never felt alone, not with Jackson. Every painting he brought home from school, every report card with his improving grades, every time he reached for my hand, crossing the street. These moments filled my life with purpose. I wasn't just raising a child. I was nurturing a kind, intelligent human who would one day make his mark on the world. Sometimes at night, after Jackson was asleep, I'd sit by his bed, just watching him breathe, overwhelmed with gratitude that out of all the women in the world, I got to be his mom. Not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the thousands of everyday moments that bond a parent to a child. I made scrapbooks, documenting every milestone, wrote him letters on his birthdays that I stored in a special box for him to read someday. The path wasn't always smooth. There were tantrums in grocery stores, notes from teachers about talking too much in class the time he tried to fix my laptop and deleted all my files. But even in the hardest moments, I never regretted our life together. Jackson wasn't just the child I raised. He was the person who made me a mother. When Jackson turned 10, I decided it was time for our first serious conversation about his adoption. I'd always been honest about him being adopted, mentioning it casually since he was a toddler. But now he was old enough to understand more details and ask deeper questions. We sat on our small balcony one summer evening, sharing a bowl of popcorn as the sun set over Seattle. I brought out a special box containing what little information I had about his birth parents, their ages when he was born. Their general physical descriptions, the fact that his birth mother had been a talented artist. "Am I allowed to be curious about them?" Jackson asked, his voice small. "Of course you are," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "They're part of your story. Being curious doesn't mean you love me any less." To my surprise, Jackson seemed satisfied with this limited information at the time. He nodded thoughtfully, asked a few basic questions, and then changed the subject to his upcoming science fair project. But something had shifted. A door had been opened that couldn't be closed again. As Jackson moved into his early teens, he blossomed. His natural aptitude for science became evident as he won the regional science fair 3 years running. On the soccer field, he was fast and strategic, earning a spot as team captain by 8th grade. His teachers consistently praised his critical thinking skills and leadership potential. I watched with pride as my quiet little boy grew into a confident, capable young man. But the teenage years also brought new challenges. At 13, Jackson began asking more questions about his birth family. During a late-night conversation after I picked him up from a friend's house, he asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Why didn't they want me?" My heart broke at the pain in his voice. "Sweetheart, it wasn't that they didn't want you. They were very young, not ready to be parents. They made the hardest choice a parent can make because they believed it would give you your best chance." He nodded, but I could see the hurt lingering in his eyes. That night, I heard him crying softly in his room. And it took everything in me not to go to him to respect that he needed space to process his feelings. Around 14, the typical teenage rebellion kicked in, but with an adoption twist. "You don't understand me," became a common refrain during our arguments, but carried a deeper weight than when his friends said the same to their biological parents. Every typical parent-child conflict became magnified through the lens of our different genetics. "Maybe I'm just not like you," he'd say during disagreements, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Each time it stung like a physical blow. Jackson's 15th birthday brought a new interest in his heritage. A school project on genetic traits had highlighted for him all the things he couldn't trace: his athletic ability, his perfect pitch, his analytical mind. I helped him research adoption registries, explaining that when he turned 18, he could access more information if he wanted to. We pored over books about adoption together, joining a support group for adoptive families with teens. "Do you think they ever think about me?" he asked one night as we drove home from a group meeting. "I'm absolutely certain they do," I answered honestly, "especially on your birthday." Our relationship had always been close, built on open communication and trust. But as Jackson neared the end of high school, I felt him pulling away normal teenage independence, I told myself, though a small voice inside worried it was more. The summer before his senior year, the arguments increased. He stayed out later than his curfew, rolled his eyes at family traditions that had once been sacred to us both. The sweet boy, who once couldn't fall asleep without a hug, seemed to barely tolerate my presence. "It's just a phase," Thelma reassured me over coffee. "All kids push boundaries before they leave the nest. It doesn't mean anything." But deep down, I sensed something more significant brewing. I'd catch Jackson studying his reflection in the mirror, as if searching for someone else's features in his face. He began spending hours online in his room, the door firmly closed. "I just need my privacy," he'd say when I knocked, asking if everything was okay. Despite the growing distance, we still had moments of connection. When he was accepted to 3 colleges early in his senior year, he burst into the kitchen, waving the acceptance letters, his face alight with the same joy I'd seen when he took his first steps. When he won a prestigious science scholarship, I was the first person he called. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he said that night over the celebration dinner I'd prepared, his favorite lasagna with extra cheese. If only I'd known how quickly everything was about to change, perhaps I would have held on to that moment a little longer, memorized every detail of his smile across the table, the way the light caught in his eyes, the sound of his laugh. The last echoes of our life as we'd known it for 17 years. Everything changed on a Tuesday in February of Jackson's senior year. I came home from my shift at the hospital to find him sitting at the kitchen table, his laptop open, his face a storm of emotions. "I found them," he said, simply turning the screen toward me. My heart seemed to stop, then resume at double speed. On the screen was a DNA matching website displaying a message from a woman named Amanda, claiming to be a 99.8% genetic match to Jackson, his birth mother. "She lives in Portland," Jackson said, his voice trembling with excitement. "Just 3 hours away, all this time." The next few days were a whirlwind. Amanda and Jackson exchanged emails, then phone numbers. A video call was arranged, and I hovered anxiously in the background as my son saw his birth mother's face for the first time. I couldn't help but notice the similarities they had, the same expressive eyebrows, the same dimple in their left cheek when they smiled. "And this is Daniel, your birth father," Amanda said, a handsome man appearing beside her on the screen. "We actually got married a few years after you were born." I watched Jackson's face transform with wonder as he saw his genetic blueprint reflected back at him for the first time. The shape of his hands matched Daniel's. His artistic talent clearly came from Amanda, who worked as a graphic designer. They had 2 younger children, Jackson's biological siblings, a 13-year-old sister, and an 11-year-old brother. "Why did you give me up?" Jackson asked bluntly during that first call. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "We were 17 and 18, still in high school. Our parents wouldn't support us keeping you, and we couldn't provide the life you deserved. It was the hardest decision we ever made." I tried to be supportive, encouraging Jackson's growing relationship with his birth family. But as the weeks passed, I noticed subtle changes. Jackson began spending hours on video calls with Amanda and Daniel, often ending our family dinner early to talk with them. Weekend visits to Portland became regular occurrences, leaving our modest apartment feeling emptier than it had in years. One evening, scrolling through social media, I found a photo of Jackson with Amanda and Daniel at a Trailblazers basketball game, all 3 wearing matching jerseys. "Finally found where I belong," read the caption. The words felt like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I closed the app quickly, but the image remained seared in my mind. "It's normal for him to be excited about this connection," my friend from the adoptive parent support group assured me. "It doesn't diminish what you 2 have." But it felt diminished all the same. Our movie nights disappeared. Our Sunday morning pancake tradition faded away. When Jackson was home, he was physically present but mentally elsewhere, often texting Amanda or looking at photos of his biological family. The differences between us became more pronounced than ever. Amanda and Daniel lived in a sprawling home in an upscale Portland neighborhood, successful in their respective careers in design and software development. They traveled internationally, owned a boat, sent their children to private school. Next to their glamorous life, our cozy but modest existence seemed painfully inadequate. During one weekend visit to Portland, Jackson called me excitedly. "They have a grand piano, Mom. And guess what?" Daniel says. "I get my musical ability from his side of the family. His mother was a concert pianist." I swallowed the lump in my throat, remembering the years of saving to afford Jackson's piano lessons, the second-hand keyboard we'd practiced on before we could afford a small, upright piano. The way I'd sat beside him at every recital, bursting with pride at his natural talent, I now knew came from grandparents he'd never met until now. The college decision process, which I'd imagined us navigating together, became dominated by Amanda and Daniel's input. They'd both attended prestigious universities and had strong opinions about where Jackson should go. "Daniel thinks with my grades and test scores I should aim for Ivy League," Jackson mentioned casually over breakfast, as if Daniel's opinion carried more weight than 17 years of my guidance. I tried to hide my hurt, focusing instead on practical matters: scholarship applications, financial aid forms, campus visit logistics. But increasingly, those plans were made without me. Amanda and Daniel took Jackson to tour campuses I couldn't afford to visit, sent him college preparation books. I'd already bought versions of, spoke of connections at universities I couldn't offer. "They're just trying to help," Jackson said defensively when I gently mentioned feeling sidelined. "And they know more about this stuff than you do." The comment stung more than he could know. Yes, their college degrees outranked my nursing diploma, their financial resources dwarfed mine, their social connections extended further. But no one knew Jackson, his fears, his dreams, his potential better than I did. Or at least, that's what I'd always believed. As spring progressed, I watched helplessly as Jackson's center of gravity shifted away from our home, drawn by the magnetic pull of genetic connection, shared traits, and the allure of a more affluent family life. I tried to be the bigger person, to remember that this exploration was normal, healthy even. But each night alone in our apartment, while Jackson stayed over in Portland, yet again, the emptiness threatened to swallow me whole. In April, the acceptance letter from Jackson's dream school arrived. University of Washington had offered him a substantial merit scholarship recognizing his exceptional academic record and scientific achievements. After years of scrimping and saving for his college fund, the financial relief was immense. "We should celebrate," I said, already planning a special dinner. "I could invite your friends from the science club, maybe reserve that back room at Giovanni's you like." Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Amanda and Daniel already have something planned. They're hosting a dinner at Riverside Grill next Saturday." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "Well, that's nice. What time should I be there?" His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "The thing is, Mom, they thought it might be better if it was just family." The words hit me like a physical blow. Just family. After 17 years of bedtime stories and bandaged knees, midnight fevers, and morning hugs, I wasn't considered family. "I am your family, Jackson," I said quietly. He fidgeted with the acceptance letter. "You know what I mean. Birth family. It would be weird to have both moms there. People might feel uncomfortable." "People? Or you?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he snapped, suddenly angry. "This is already complicated enough without you getting all emotional." I tried reasoning with him, explaining how important it was for me to be part of this milestone. But Jackson grew increasingly agitated, eventually storming to his room and locking the door. My texts and knocks went unanswered for the rest of the evening. The next day, scrolling through social media with tears blurring my vision, I saw Amanda had posted about the upcoming celebration. "So proud of our brilliant son getting into his dream school. Can't wait to celebrate at Riverside next weekend with the whole family." The comments section was filled with congratulations from her friends and family people who had known Jackson for mere months, while I'd raised him for nearly 2 decades. Later that week, I received a call from Patricia, another mom from Jackson's school, whose son was on the science team with him. "Nannie, I'm not sure if I should say anything," she began hesitantly, "but I overheard Jackson talking to some friends at our house yesterday. He was saying how he finally found his real family and that it feels like he's where he belongs now. I thought you should know." I thanked her for her honesty, then sat in my silent kitchen for hours after hanging up. Real family, where he belongs. Each phrase was another crack in my already breaking heart. Despite Jackson's wishes, I continued preparing for his departure to college. I quietly purchased extra-long twin sheets for his dorm bed, a new laptop to replace his aging one-storage containers for his belongings. He was rarely home now, spending most weekends, and even some weeknights at Amanda and Daniel's house. But I kept his room ready, his favorite foods in the fridge just in case. The final blow came 2 weeks before he was set to leave for college. We were having a rare dinner together at home when Jackson casually mentioned his plans for Thanksgiving break. "Amanda and Daniel are planning a big family ski trip to Whistler. All the cousins will be there." "That sounds fun for a few days," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "When will you be back home? I thought we could still have our traditional dinner that weekend." Jackson looked down at his plate. "Actually, I'm staying the whole break. It's 10 days in British Columbia." After a pause, he added, "Maybe we could do something the weekend before I go back for winter quarter." In that moment, I realized I was no longer his home. The foundation I thought we'd built together over 17 years had crumbled in just 5 months. As I cleared the dishes from the table, I wondered if there had ever been a chance of competing with the powerful pull of biological connection with the allure of a wealthier, more polished family than what I could offer alone. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since the early days of motherhood, when I'd been overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising a child alone. Back then, I'd feared not being enough for Jackson. Now, 17 years later, it seemed my fears had been justified after all. The night before Jackson was scheduled to leave for college, I prepared his favorite meal pot roast with rosemary potatoes and homemade rolls. I'd taken the day off work to clean the apartment and finish packing the last of his supplies. 6 o'clock came and went, then 7. At 8, I received a text. "Staying at Amanda's tonight. They're helping me pack. See you tomorrow, maybe." Maybe. As if seeing his mother before leaving for college was an afterthought, a task to squeeze in if convenient. I wrapped the untouched dinner and put it away, then sat alone at our small kitchen table surrounded by the college preparation guides and dorm essentials I'd carefully gathered over months. The next morning, another text arrived. "Need you to transfer tuition money and first semester expenses. University portal shows it's due in 2 days." No greeting. No acknowledgement of our last night together. That never happened. Just a financial request. I checked the parent portal for the university and saw something that made my stomach drop. Jackson had removed me as his emergency contact. Amanda's name now occupied that space. I called him immediately, but the call went to voicemail. 3 more attempts, same result. Finally, I sent a text. "We need to talk before I transfer any money. Please call me." Hours passed with no response. The stress and heartache of the past months caught up with me physically. Sharp chest pains sent me to the emergency room at my own hospital, where my colleagues diagnosed a stress-induced cardiac episode. Not a full heart attack, but a warning sign. "You need to reduce your stress levels immediately," Dr. Martinez, my colleague and friend, advised. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high." No one called Jackson to tell him his mother was in the hospital. What would be the point? He had made his choice about who his family was now. That night, lying in my hospital bed, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. When I was discharged the next morning, I went straight to the bank and closed the joint account I had maintained for Jackson's college expenses. I opened a new account in my name, only transferring the funds I had saved over 17 years of careful budgeting. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was the manager of Riverside Grill, the upscale restaurant where Jackson's college send-off dinner had been held. "Ms. Carter, I'm calling about an unpaid bill for the Phillips party last Saturday night. The reservation was for 15 people and the final bill came to $5,032. I was confused. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. I wasn't at that dinner. The reservation was made by Amanda Phillips, but she said the bill would be handled by Jackson Carter. We've tried reaching them both, but haven't received payment. Since the credit card initially provided was declined, we're contacting all names associated with the party." The pieces fell into place. Amanda had hosted the lavish celebration, promised to pay, then backed out, and expected Jackson, or more accurately me, to cover the extravagant expense. Before I could formulate a response, my call waiting beeped. It was Jackson. "Mom!" he shouted when I answered, his voice a mixture of anger and panic. "What did you do to our account? My card was just declined for $5,000 at the restaurant. Amanda says I need to pay for the dinner since it was for me, but the card isn't working." "I closed our joint account," I said calmly, surprising myself with my steady voice. "You what? You can't do that? That's my college money." "No, Jackson. That's the money I saved for 17 years to support your education, and I will still use it for your tuition and legitimate expenses. But I won't be financing lavish parties I wasn't invited to." "You're just jealous," he accused, his voice cracking. "Jealous that I finally have a real family who cares about me, who understands me. Amanda and Daniel are successful, educated people who can help my future in ways you never could." Each word was a knife, but something had shifted inside me. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else, clarity, and the stirrings of righteous anger. "I have loved you and supported you every day of your life since you were 6 months old," I said, my voice low but firm. "I have worked extra shifts, skipped meals, sacrificed my own dreams to give you every opportunity. I have been at every game, every concert, every doctor's appointment. I held you through every nightmare and celebrated every triumph. If that's not real family, I don't know what is." "But they're my blood," Jackson shouted. "And where was that blood when you had chickenpox at age 4 and couldn't stop scratching? Where was that blood when you needed braces and I took a second job to afford them? Where was that blood during 17 birthdays, Christmases, first days of school?" My voice broke, but I continued. "Blood isn't what makes a family, Jackson. Time does. Love does. Showing up does." There was silence on the other end, then a click as he hung up. I called the restaurant manager back and explained that I would not be covering the bill and that they should continue to seek payment from Amanda and Daniel Phillips, the hosts who had made the reservation and ordered the food and drinks. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from sadness this time, but from a strange mixture of grief and liberation. For 17 years, my identity had been wholly wrapped up in being Jackson's mother. Now I needed to remember who Nannie Carter was apart from that role. The following weekend, I heard through the parent grapevine that Jackson was hosting a second, smaller send-off party with his high school friends at a local pizza place. A more modest celebration than the extravagant dinner at Riverside Grill, but still, I hadn't been invited. After hours of internal debate, I decided to go anyway. Not to crash the party or embarrass Jackson, but to say what needed to be said, if not for him, then for myself. I arrived as the celebration was winding down. Jackson's friends' kids I'd driven to soccer practice, helped with science projects, fed countless after-school snacks fell silent when I walked in. Jackson himself froze pizza slice halfway to his mouth, his eyes widening in shock and something that looked like embarrassment. "Mrs. Carter." Jackson's friend Tyler stood up, giving me a hug. "We haven't seen you in forever." "I know," I said simply, then turned to Jackson. "Can we talk for a minute privately?" After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and followed me to a quiet corner of the restaurant. Up close, I could see the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Finding and connecting with his birth family should have been a joyful expansion of his support system, not a source of strain and division. "I'm not here to argue or make a scene," I began. "But before you leave for college, there are things I need you to hear." "Mom," he started, but I held up a hand. "Please, just listen." I took a deep breath. "For 17 years, I have been your mother in every way that matters. I've loved you with my whole heart, supported you with everything I have, and built my entire life around giving you the best future possible." His eyes darted around, looking anywhere but at my face. "I understand that finding Amanda and Daniel has been meaningful for you. I never wanted to keep you from knowing your biological roots or connecting with that part of your identity. But the way you've pushed me aside, treated me as if I'm suddenly nothing to you." My voice cracked, but I pushed through. "It's cruel, Jackson. And it's beneath the person I raised you to be." "They're my real family," he muttered, but the words lacked conviction. "Real family," I repeated. "What makes family real, Jackson? Is it shared DNA, or is it who shows up day after day, year after year? Who knows that you sleep with your window cracked even in winter? Who can tell when you're coming down with a cold just by the sound of your voice? Who sat through 34 piano recitals and 122 soccer games? Who taught you to ride a bike, to read, to tie your shoes?" Something in his expression wavered. "I'm not asking you to choose," I continued. "That's not what this is about. Amanda and Daniel can be part of your life without me being erased from it. But I want you to think about what family really means before you throw away 17 years of love and history." I set a wrapped package on the table between us. "This is for you. Open it when you're ready." As I turned to leave, I addressed his friends. "It was good to see all of you. I wish you the best in your college adventures." Several of them looked uncomfortable, glancing between Jackson and me. A few murmured goodbye or offered awkward waves. I held my head high as I walked out, even as tears threatened. The package I'd left contained an album I'd spent the past week creating photographs documenting our journey from the day I brought him home as an infant to his high school graduation. Each page included handwritten memories, the time he'd won the science fair with his solar-powered water purification system, the summer we'd camped in our living room for a week when we couldn't afford a real vacation, the countless small moments that had formed the tapestry of our shared life. Accompanying the album was a letter expressing my unconditional love, but also establishing new boundaries. I would pay his tuition directly to the university and provide a reasonable monthly allowance for essentials, but nothing more. The lavish spending account he'd become accustomed to since meeting Amanda and Daniel was closed. He would need to take responsibility for his choices and his finances, just as I'd always planned to teach him before this whirlwind disrupted our lives. Back at home, I made another difficult but necessary decision. I listed our apartment for sale. It had always been too expensive for just me, chosen specifically for the good school district and proximity to Jackson's activities. With him gone, I could downsize to something more affordable, perhaps closer to the hospital where I worked. The next day, I enrolled in an advanced nursing certification program I'd been postponing for years. It would mean longer hours and intense study, but also a significant pay increase and new career opportunities. For so long, my own ambitions had taken a back seat to Jackson's needs and activities. Now it was time to reclaim those dreams. I also joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children. Sitting in a circle with other mothers and fathers whose children had cut contact for various reasons, I found unexpected comfort. Their stories were different from mine. Many involved addiction, mental illness, or toxic in-laws. But the core pain was the same. The sense of failure, of confusion, of wondering where things went wrong. "The hardest part," said a father whose daughter hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, "is accepting that you can't control another adult's choices even when those choices break your heart." Slowly, I began rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during the busy years of single parenting. I started hiking on weekends, rediscovering my love for nature photography. I volunteered at a local crisis nursery, offering temporary care for infants and toddlers when their parents were in emergency situations. Each day brought moments of both grief and growth. I would catch myself buying Jackson's favorite cereal out of habit, then remember. I'd see something that would make him laugh and reach for my phone before stopping myself. But alongside these pangs came new experiences, new connections, new versions of joy I'd forgotten were possible. Amanda never contacted me about the restaurant bill, nor to discuss Jackson's welfare or our shared connection to him. I sometimes wondered what she told Jackson about me, whether she encouraged or discouraged his relationship with the woman who had raised him. But ultimately, I realized I couldn't control that narrative. I could only be true to myself and to the love I would always carry for my son, regardless of his choices. 2 months after Jackson left for college, I was sorting through boxes in my new, smaller apartment when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and most of my friends would have texted first. Opening the door, I found myself face to face with Jackson. He looked thinner than when he'd left, with dark circles under his eyes and a hesitant, almost frightened expression. "Jackson," I said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming home this weekend." "I didn't tell anyone," he admitted, his voice rough. Can I come in?" I stepped aside, allowing him into the unfamiliar space. He looked around at the boxes still waiting to be unpacked, the smaller but cozier living room, the unfamiliar view from the windows. "You moved," he said, unnecessarily. "Yes, the old place was too big for just me, and this is closer to the hospital." I gestured toward the couch. "Would you like to sit?" "Are you hungry? I can make you something." He sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, hands clasped between his knees. "I'm okay, thanks." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with 2 months of unspoken words and unresolved pain. "How's school?" I finally asked. "It's hard." He swallowed visibly. "Harder than I expected." "Academically?" He shook his head. "That part's okay. It's just—" He trailed off, then took a deep breath. "Amanda stopped returning my calls 3 weeks ago, and when I finally got through to her, she said they're taking a step back because I was becoming too dependent on them. Apparently, they didn't sign up to support a college student." My heart ached for him despite everything. "I'm sorry, Jackson. That must be painful." "The thing is," he continued, voice cracking, "I ran out of money. The meal plan only covers weekdays and the dorm closes during breaks. I called Amanda asking for help, and she said—" His eyes filled with tears. "She said I should learn financial independence, that they have their other kids to think about. But when I called my bank, all my accounts were empty or closed." I sat beside him, careful to maintain some distance. "I transferred your tuition directly to the university as I promised. But yes, I closed our joint accounts after what happened." "I know," he said quietly. "I realized that the day after the restaurant fiasco, when I couldn't even buy coffee. I just didn't want to admit it." He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Amanda and Daniel never paid that bill, did they?" "No. As far as I know, it's still outstanding." He nodded slowly. "They told everyone at the dinner that I would be covering it as a thank you for their support. When my card was declined, Amanda made a big show of saying she'd take care of it this time, but she never did. The restaurant keeps calling me." I resisted the urge to solve this problem for him, as I had so many others throughout his life. "What are you going to do about that?" "I got a job at the campus coffee shop. I'm working 30 hours a week between classes. It'll take me a few months, but I'll pay it off." For the first time, I noticed the coffee stains on his sweatshirt, the barista pin on his backpack. My academically focused son, who had never needed to work during high school, was now juggling studies and a nearly full-time job. "It's my mess," he added, as if reading my thoughts. "I need to fix it myself." The maturity in those words gave me a glimmer of hope. We sat in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again, his voice small. "I found the album you left. I've read your letter probably 20 times. And I've been an ungrateful jerk." The words tumbled out in a rush. I was so caught up in finally finding my missing pieces that I completely dismissed the person who's been my constant for my entire life. I let Amanda and Daniel flatter me and spoil me, and I threw away 17 years of real love for a fantasy that fell apart as soon as it became inconvenient for them. Tears spilled down his cheeks. "The worst part is, I knew what I was doing. Every time I excluded you or said something hurtful, I could see the pain in your eyes. But I ignored it because it was easier than dealing with the complicated feelings of having two sets of parents. I wanted to comfort him to say it was all okay, but we both deserved more honesty than that. You hurt me deeply, Jackson. You made me feel disposable after I'd given you everything I had to give." "I know," he whispered, "and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry. So sorry." He wiped at his tears with his sleeve. "You're my real mom. You always have been. DNA doesn't make a parent loved as sacrificed as showing up does, and you've done all of that every single day of my life." The words I had longed to hear for months washed over me, healing some of the deepest wounds, but not erasing the scars. This would be a long road back to trust for both of us. "Where do we go from here?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I don't want to lose you. Even if I don't deserve another chance, I'm asking for one anyway." I reached out slowly and took his hand. "Rebuilding trust takes time, Jackson. It won't happen overnight, but if you're willing to put in the work, so am I." For the first time that day, he smiled, a small, tremulous thing, but genuine. "I'd like that." We talked for hours that afternoon, really talked in a way we hadn't in over a year. He told me about his classes, his new friends, the adjustment to college life. I told him about my nursing certification program, my new apartment, the changes I was making in my life. Neither of us mentioned Amanda or Daniel again that day, though I knew that conversation would need to happen eventually. As evening fell, I made us a simple dinner: grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, a comfort food from his childhood. As we ate, I saw glimpses of my son returning his laugh, his thoughtful questions, his animated expressions when describing his biology professor's eccentric teaching style. "I was thinking," he said hesitantly as we cleared the dishes, "about changing my major." "Oh, I thought you were set on biochemistry." "I was, but lately I've been volunteering at the campus health center, just basic stuff like taking vital signs and patient intake. And I really like it." He paused, then added, "I'm thinking about nursing actually, like you." The admission took me by surprise. "You never showed interest in nursing before." "I know, but watching you all these years, how you help people, how you really make a difference every day, it stuck with me more than I realized." He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Plus, I'm good at science, and I like working with people." Something warm unfurled in my chest, not pride exactly, but a profound sense of connection. For years, I'd watched Jackson strain to find himself in his unknown genetic heritage. Now perhaps he was finding parts of himself in the woman who had raised him in the values and experiences we'd shared. When it was time for him to leave, he had an early class the next day and a long bus ride back to campus. He hugged me tightly at the door. "Can I come back next weekend?" he asked. "Maybe we could start a new tradition, Sunday brunch or something." "I'd like that very much," I said, squeezing his hand. And Jackson, I'm proud of you, not just for apologizing, but for finding your way through this on your own terms. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment, processing everything that had happened. The pain of the past months hadn't magically disappeared, nor had my lingering hurt and weariness. But alongside those feelings was something new hope and the first tender shoots of forgiveness taking root. 2 weeks later, Jackson called with news. There's a parent orientation weekend coming up at school. Would you want to come? They're doing departmental introductions, and I'd really like you to meet my advisor in the nursing program. My throat tightened with emotion. I'd be honored, Jackson. When I arrived on campus that Friday, Jackson was waiting at the visitor parking lot. As he led me to the registration table, a volunteer asked, "Is this your mom?" Without hesitation, Jackson put his arm around my shoulders and said, "Yes, this is my mom, Nannie Carter." In that moment, I knew we would be okay. Not perfect, not unchanged by what had happened, but fundamentally okay. The road to healing would be long, with likely setbacks along the way. But we had taken the first step together, and for now, that was enough. Love isn't a competition between biological and adoptive families. It isn't measured in DNA percentages or years of absence. True family is built in the trenches of everyday life, in midnight fevers and morning carpools, in homework struggles and holiday traditions, in showing up when it's hard and staying when it would be easier to leave. Sometimes our children need to lose us before they truly find us. And sometimes, in that painful process, we also find ourselves. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone you loved deeply seemed to forget your value in their life? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family forgiveness and finding your way back to each other. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear these words today. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, family isn't always about blood, but it is always about love.